All right, welcome back to the ManTalks show. I'm Connor BEATON. Today, we're gonna be diving into why it is so damn hard to quit weed and a proven process that can support you in letting go of it if you are ready. Now, this is real for me. I definitely struggled with smoking weed and, well, not struggled with smoking weed. I didn't have a problem smoking it. I had a problem not smoking it anymore years and years and years ago. And one of the things that I've found to be quite common for a lot of guys is that weed can become something that you really struggle to let go of. And there is some very real reasons for that. So first, I'm going to give you the breakdown of why it is so hard to quit, why it is so hard to let go of, because you actually can, not that you can get addicted to it necessarily. There's a lot of debate around that. I'm not interested in engaging in that debate. But it can certainly be extremely challenging to quit. And then I'm going to give you a proven strategy that works in terms of quitting. It is a little bit of effort, but like anything in life, all the good things are. So let's begin. Reason number one why it is so hard for you to quit smoking weed is that it actually has a brain wiring component. So when you smoke or when you vape THC, on a regular basis, your brain's CB1 receptors get flooded. And these receptors normally help you to regulate things like your mood, your memory, your emotions, your reward system, your appetite. So this is a very, very important function within the brain. And over time, your brain starts to down-regulate them. It basically turns the volume down on your natural internal system of being able to regulate through the CB1 receptors and becomes more reliant on the THC, on the weed, to basically down-regulate or use those receptors. And when that happens, it's because the THC and the cannabinoids that are in the marijuana are actually so potent that they start to block the CB1 receptors or sort of numb them out, I guess you could say, from your natural cannabinoids and endocannabinoids within your brain. And so your body sort of depletes itself of the natural process and becomes more dependent on the external synthetics. So this is about tolerance. And what ends up happening is that you need more and more and more THC to feel normal. And without it, things start to feel really dull, really boring or unmotivated. And that is your brain beginning to adapt to the cannabis. And what you can find is that for some of you, you might find yourself needing or sort of craving or wanting the weed in order to feel more relaxed, feel more calm, feel more grounded, feel just sort of excited. And you'll become more dependent on the marijuana because your brain and the CB1 receptors have basically become more dependent on you consuming THC, consuming marijuana in order to deal with that with that sensation inside the body. So the CB1 receptors, just to touch on this, they really play a modulatory role, meaning that it doesn't really directly cause activity within the brain, but sort of fine tunes the neurotransmitter release. And part of the key functions are about reward and motivation, right? So the CB1 can support in regulating dopamine release indirectly, which is why cannabis can feel pleasurable and not reinforcing. It's also partly responsible for memory and learning, for appetite and metabolism. I don't know about you, but I definitely would get the munchies. And so CB1, CB1 in the hypothalamus stimulates the appetite, and this is where the munchies come from. I was definitely a huge smoke weed and eat a massive bowl of popcorn guy. Pain modulation is also responsible for, but then the big one is mood and stress regulation. So the CB1 receptor in your brain is a big conduit for the nervous system. And basically the endocannabinoid, it's a very challenging word to say for some reason for me, signaling at the CB1 receptor helps to regulate anxiety, fear extinction, and stress recovery. So it really plays a pretty vital role in how you feel. So that's number one, brain rewiring. Number two, why it's so hard to quit is that withdrawal is very, 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 very real. A lot of people still think that cannabis, that weed doesn't cause withdrawal. That has completely been disproven. The research shows otherwise. And almost half of regular users will experience almost a full-blown withdrawal syndrome. And this means that they can experience symptoms like a lot of anxiety, a lot of irritability, not having any real appetite. And the biggest one for a lot of people is that all of a sudden you can start to have insomnia. You can't sleep, or when you are sleeping, you're having crazy vivid dreams that end up disrupting your sleep and waking you up. So symptoms usually start for most people. And again, the crazy thing here is that when they say heavy users, that is in the literature, in the scientific literature, that's 2 to 3 times a week. So it's not a daily thing. It's like if you're smoking weed twice a week, that's considered heavy usage, which is pretty surprising. So symptoms of withdrawal usually start 24 to 48 hours after you stop smoking marijuana, and they peak 2 to 6 days for the really heavy users, right? If you're smoking weed every other day or every single day, sleep issues can kind of drag on for weeks. And let's be honest, that's likely where most of you have had the greatest challenge, right? You say you're going to quit weed, and then a couple days in, 4 or 5 days in, all of a sudden, there's sleep issues, you're anxious, you're super sort of like flatlined emotionally, or you're just really stressed out constantly and super irritable. And the desire to go back to smoking it becomes almost unbearable. Number 3 is potency. Let's be honest, potency is a problem in a lot of modern day weed, right? The weed that most of you are smoking now, whether it's through a vape or, it's in a blunt or a bong or whatever, it's not the weed of the 1970s or 80s, right? Back then, the average THC percentage was about 4%. And today, the average dispensary is selling a flower with a THC percentage of 16% or higher, and concentrates can get up to 60, 70, and even 90% THC. So, this is the difference between having, a beer with 4% in it and then having a beer with 16% in it. One, you can have one beer, and the other one, you can have one beer and then get knocked on your ass. Right? So the intensity, and then if you're having a vape with a concentrate or a gummy with a concentrate that has 60, 70% in it, that can just green you out, right? You can just get insanely flatline. So the amount of THC that your body is then consuming is even more disrupted. So with these higher potency levels, this sort of equals stronger effects in your brain, more disruption to that CB1 receptor, more disruption to your nervous system, more dependency on the cannabinoid within your brain, faster tolerance levels as well, meaning that, if you're smoking a weed with 4% THC level in it, and then you start to go up to 16% and 20%, what ends up happening is that you need stronger and stronger weed in order to get the same level of high. And this, again, leads to worse withdrawal. So the stronger the THC that you smoke or that you consume, the stronger the weed that you consume, then the worse the withdrawal is likely to be. It's not just this is the biggest misconception. It is not about the frequency of the weed consumption. This is where most people go wrong. It's like, well, I only smoke weed twice a week. Like, it's not that big of a deal, but you are smoking really intense weed that has a super high THC level. And then when you try to stop smoking the weed, you really struggle because the potency of the marijuana that you've been smoking has created a lot of these side effects. And with this increased Potency, with the higher levels of THC, comes a whole bunch of issues, right? Not just a worse withdrawal, but there is also a much higher risk of dependency. Many people, I think it's something like 40 to 45% of people have a natural anxiety response to higher levels of THC. And so you have a spike of people that are, experience a lot of anxiety. And then some people can even experience psychosis. So you can have a kind of psychotic break, which many people that I know, I've talked to many people that have experienced that, where you have a bad trip. And it's not just like a bad trip where you don't feel very well. And, like if you get too drunk, you just don't feel very well and you have a bad time. It's you can really do psychological damage. So in other words, the game has changed. That's the third reason. The fourth reason is that there's actually new side effects that are starting to show up between vaping and the higher THC levels. So when you look at some of the new products that are coming out, doctors are seeing more cases of cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, and that's repeated vomiting episodes. It's wild that that's even a thing, that only stop when somebody quits smoking weed or consuming cannabis. There's also a stronger link between heavy cannabis usage and psychosis in vulnerable people. So if you have a history in your family of psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, sort of manic depressive disorders, multiple personality, all these types of things, if you have in your family history a history of any of those types of mental illnesses or mental challenges, this leaves you much more open to experiencing something like that. Now, I've actually seen and worked with men who have had PTSD-induced symptoms from having bad trips with marijuana, where they've had such an intense trip or such an intense high that it created a kind of crack or a break in their psyche. They experienced some type of minor or sort of mid-level psychosis. And what ensued after that was not just massive withdrawal symptoms, but PTSD-like symptoms, where people are experiencing derealization or depersonalization, which is very, very intense, right? For some of the men that I've worked with, they end up having these experiences where they can't really feel if things are real, or everything starts to break down. That's what derealization is, or depersonalization is. It's that you feel as if nothing is necessarily real, or you start to not be able to tell. So the veil between the dreamscape, right, the dream reality, and real reality begins to sort of fade, and people can't really tell, oh, this is real life right now versus when I'm dreaming. And that can be very, very challenging. The last piece of why it can be so challenging to quit is it has become so socially acceptable, and accessibility is everywhere, right? There's marijuana stores everywhere now. You can buy it online in some states, and in certain places, it's so easy to get. And then you have people that have started to sort of co-use it. So there's a lot of people will they'll have spliffs, right? So you're smoking nicotine and weed, and this combo is way harder to quit, because now it's not just that you're smoking weed, but you are also introducing another chemical or product, which is a nicotine, which is basically creating another level of dependency or addiction. And so you're not just trying to quit one thing, you're trying to quit both, because all of a sudden your cigarettes are not cigarettes, they are spliffs, and you're smoking weed and nicotine. So this is why it can be extremely challenging. I'm going to break down for you now the ways in which you can quit. And this is a proven strategy. Now, I know it's tough. Quitting is challenging depending on how much you're using, but there are proven ways, and there's some good research on this that shows how you can do this. So I'm going to try and give you the best roadmap that I possibly can. So before trying to quit at all, you need to prepare. So stage number one is begin to prepare. So set a date about a week or two out and start to track your usage. How much are you smoking? or consuming cannabis? When are you consuming it? And in what form are you consuming it, right? If you're a heavy user, really, this is a big part. So step number one, plan a date, far out, a week out, 2 weeks out. Number two in this step is really track how much you're consuming and when you're consuming it. You're going to need to know, we're going to need that extra support. And then the third part of this first stage or this first step is really, if you're a heavy user, starting to switch to a lower THC, higher CBD option. And this is going to really start to soften the withdrawal. So the biggest thing that you can do is, instead of trying to quit cold turkey, which I see a lot of guys doing, which, what a strange saying, by the way, right? Cold turkey, like where the hell did that even come from? But instead of trying to just like one day say, I'm going to go from smoking every single day or every other day, this really intense weed, I'm going to just quit entirely tomorrow, which almost never works. What you want to do is phase out. So start to, over the course of a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, gradually reduce the amount of THC that is in the product that you are consuming, whether it's, through a bong or a blunt or, a pipe or a vape or whatever it is. So you just really focusing in on, okay, if I'm smoking weed or whatever, consuming marijuana that has 16% THC in it, gradually bringing that down to as little as possible. And this is going to help your system to adapt, because you're signaling to your system that you're building a runway towards letting go of it entirely. Stage number 2. So the first stage is about 2 weeks long, where you're prepping and you're starting to reduce and you're tracking how much and when you're smoking it, and you're trying to reduce the THC content. What I don't want you to do in stage number 1 is you don't have to worry about reducing the frequency. This is where a lot of people go wrong, is that they try and focus in on the frequency, but they're still blitzing themselves out on, 20, 40% THC levels. And it's still, the intensity is still there. So really focus in on, it's okay if you use it every day or every other day, whatever your frequency is, don't worry about that for right now. Stage 1, really focus in on reducing the THC intensity. Stage number 2 is beginning to manage this withdrawal. So the first 2 weeks are honestly going to be the hardest. They are going to be challenging. And what I want you to do is to build a sleep plan. Okay, build a sleep plan, because your sleep is going to get disrupted. It's depending on how much you are using and how often you are using, your sleep is just going to get disrupted. Whether it's you're having trouble sleeping, or you're having trouble falling asleep, you're having trouble staying asleep, you're having crazy dreams. So what you want to do is create a sleep plan. And what that looks like is a couple of things. Number 1, have a fixed wake up time. So no matter what, no matter how little sleep, no matter how much sleep you got, no matter when you went to bed, you have a fixed wake up time. You say, I'm going to wake up at 7. Doesn't matter if I've gotten 4 hours of sleep or 7 hours of sleep. And you set that time that you're going to wake up. And then try your best to create a fixed bedtime as well, and create something realistic, right? Don't try and go ham. Like if you normally go to bed at 11:30, don't say, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock or 9:30 at night. You're probably not going to do that. Try and stick to that time that is realistic while being reasonable. The next thing is you want to have a nighttime wind down routine. So you actually need something to help your body start to what's called down regulate, start to move down into a less stressed out state. Because again, for many of you, what will have happened is that THC and weed will have become a kind of replacer for that system in your brain and in your body. And so you want to have a wind down routine. I did a little bit of yin yoga. That really supported me. I would also journal at night, watch a little bit of Alan Watts, listen to Alan Watts for a little while. And then I had a routine in my yin yoga where I would do something called legs up the wall. And this would help me fall asleep, because I had a lot of trouble falling asleep. just in general in my life, where basically you lay flat on the ground with your feet up the wall and you just lay there for 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. And what happens is that gravity pulls the blood from your extremities, from your legs down, and forces circulation to the heart. This slows your heart rate down. It signals to the brain to move you into a more parasympathetic, rested state. And that actually allows you to move more towards a sleep state. So give yourself, 20, 30 minutes at night to have a sort of come down or nighttime wind down routine. Do some basic things like make sure that you're working out 30, 40 minutes, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. That is really going to help with the mood, which is likely going to get disrupted, and the cravings and the sleep. If you are sort of just stagnant, and not moving your body, it's likely going to be challenging in this withdrawal phase. You're going to want to move it. When cravings hit, this is a really, really big piece that I know has supported a lot of men who have struggled to commit to let go of marijuana. When cravings hit, use the 10-minute rule, okay? The 10-minute rule is delay the urge and do something else. So literally open up your phone, set a timer for 10 minutes and do something else. Text a friend, take a shower, do breath work, journal, go for a walk, do burpees. I mean, honestly, this might sound ridiculous, but in my 10-minute rule, it was either sit and do breath work or do, as many burpees as I possibly could until I was almost exhausted. You could also use that time to do a chore, but you really want to kind of busy yourself in that state and do something meaningful or productive. Cravings peak and fade, okay? They come on super strong and then they fade away, and you actually need to learn to ride them out. It's not gonna last forever. You're not gonna have an intense craving for the entire day. You're gonna have moments in the day, and this is what I wish, nobody told me this part, and I wish people had told me this. You're gonna have moments in the day where all of a sudden, the urge to smoke the weed is gonna be super, super, super strong. And then after sort of 10, 15 minutes, it's gonna fade away and reduce. And it's not gonna stay there in this intense state for the entire day. So make sure that you have a list of things. This is what I'm gonna do when my cravings really hit. For me, I found that burpees worked, doing a chore, doing stuff around the house, journaling really helped, going for a walk, calling a friend. We do have cell phones that you can call on, FaceTiming, that type of stuff. So having an accountability partner will also help. Stage number 3 is as you're going through this process. So stage number 1, again, is about 2 weeks long. And then once you let go of the weed entirely in stage number 2, that's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks long, depending on how much of a heavy user you are. And then stage number 3, you're going to really want to layer in, and maybe you do it in stage number 2 as well, but you're going to want to layer in some evidence-based therapeutic tools and resources, right? A lot of people recommend CBT, cognitive behavioral training, and MET, which is motivational enhancement therapy. These things can help you to really map your triggers, build coping strategies, help you to sort of deal with some of those cravings when they come up and have real strategies for it. I like somatic processing as well, because your nervous system has been so disrupted from the weed usage that getting back into your body, knowing how to deal with your energy when it peaks, when it tanks, all those types of pieces are going to be super, super important. So being able to not just rely on something like CBT, but find somebody that is an embodiment practitioner, that's a somatic practitioner, that's going to really help you reconnect to and be able to ground your nervous system as you're going through this. Because remember, with weed, one of the big challenges is that your brain can become quite dependent on the THC, on the cannabinoids, in order to sort of deal with your nervous system regulation. And it can really interrupt that process. And so one of the big challenges that I see a lot of men have is they go to quit, they deal with the sleep cycle, they start to deal with the cravings, they start to deal with some of these things. But what they don't address is the nervous system disruption that's happening. So their body, the anxiety that can sometimes come up, or the grief or the sort of malaise that can sort of onset for some men at like the 3 or 4 week mark of letting go of marijuana. Being able to work with somebody that knows how to deal with that somatic process is going to be very, very important. Step number 4, and you can include this throughout the entire process, is you need to reward progress, okay? This is contingency management. You need to reward progress. And this might sound super simple. This might sound really idiotic, but it works. So set up a system where you reward yourself for clean days. Now, some people take this as far as having a sort of an accountability person where you do a test, where you run tests on a daily basis to show other people that you haven't smoked weed. And you have a reward system in place for that. It could be cash. It could be a new gym gear. It could be an experience. It could be a restaurant that you go to. It could be a video game. It could be a book. Doesn't really matter. But set up a reward system where you are actively incentivizing yourself for every single day that you are not using weed, that you are clean. And so again, for some people, you're going to want to set up a structure where you're taking a test every single day and there's an accountability partner that's going through that with you, or you just have an accountability person that you're saying, I didn't do it today, right? This is the AA thing. You need that kind of sponsor. You need somebody that you have complete transparency with. Now, you need to understand how you operate. If you are going to try and lie and get away with things and not be super honest about whether or not you smoked weed, then use the tests, right? Like use the tools that are out there to make sure that you can stay accountable. This is a really, really big part of it. Many of the men that I've worked with do not create accountability and have not tried to create accountability for themselves when quitting weed in the past. And so there's no checks and balance. So if you know that you can hold yourself accountable and you can have an accountability partner and you can share with them like, yeah, you know what? It's been 4 weeks and I slipped up today and I smoked some weed or I had a gummy. That's fine. But if you know yourself well enough to know I'm probably going to lie, I'm probably going to fake the results, to falsify the results, then set up a structure where every single day, you're taking a test to show that you haven't, you haven't smoked any weed or taken any THC. And then the last piece is you can seek some medical support. So there are things that are out there that can support you in reducing the, there is FDA approved medication for cannabis addiction, for coming off of cannabinoids. And there's some promising tools that exist, right? Because CBD, for example, at high doses has been shown in trials to reduce cannabis use and some of the withdrawal symptoms. So that's an interesting and sort of promising thing, that as you start to come off of the THC usage, which is the psychoactive part of the marijuana, you can increase the CBD usage. And depending on your body and your system, that can actually support. There's other things for people out there that you can look into. And if you want, I can give you a list of things that you can look into. But there are other medical FDA approved things that you can take. I, for the most part, don't necessarily recommend that's necessary unless you are a really, really heavy user or you're just really having a tough time. You've tried to, quit weed multiple times and it just hasn't worked and you've used this structure. So this is why it's so hard. Your brain adapts, your brain becomes dependent. Withdrawal can be super intense, but it's not the withdrawal that we normally think about, right? It's not like the you're laying in bed sort of like crippled for days on end, shivering and, having those types of withdrawals that we would think about from other drugs. It is that your nervous system and your brain has become sort of more dependent on it. And today's weed is just so much stronger. So set yourself up for success, create this plan, use this plan, deploy this plan with somebody. You might want to, man it forward and send this video to somebody that you want to go through this process with, and then have them as an accountability partner so that you are doing this in tandem with them. I have found that to be super helpful for a lot of men. It's like, find a guy that's, either trying to wean off of drinking or quit smoking weed or whatever it is, and do this process with him. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Share your experience in the comments below, whether you're watching on Spotify or YouTube. Share your experience. What has helped you? Share that so that you support the other men and people that are trying to quit weed, and just share your experiences with them so that they have all of the resources possible. Tell them what has worked for you in the comment section below. And as always, until next week, Connor BEATON signing off.